Well, does the White House need to change its messaging? Chris Bedford says yes, and he wrote about this in his latest Beltway brief. So, Bedford, I mean, the Republicans are notorious for poor messaging, right? But we have so much winning going on, and the White House is leading the way in that.
Yes,
so why do they need to work on their communication?
And they've actually done, largely an incredible job on messaging in a lot of different ways. I mean, my biggest fear was when the American people saw deportations, really saw them, they'd absolutely freak out. But then it turns out they're like, we're going to get Dr. Phil and go down to the MS-13 hideout. And Americans are like, this is great TV. Because remember, one of the horrible things about 2020 is they took cops from us. Mm-hmm. America likes cops. That was a good show. And the White House is doing that. They're doing a great job in communication. But sometimes they're saying the quiet part out loud. And this is particularly interesting for DOJ. The Deputy Acting Attorney General has a couple of times kind of put his foot in his mouth. One was, we're talking about the case of Eric Adams, the New York City mayor. He was prosecuted under trumped-up charges. The case is thin. The Washington Post knows the case is stupid and thin. The Wall Street Journal knows the case is stupid and thin. You'll hear it across the board. And it all came down after Eric Adams went after Joe Biden. So it's a politicized prosecution, evidence strongly suggests. Also, the Supreme Court has knocked those things down in the past. When the idiot governor of Virginia, former Republican, was prosecuted for corruption, I remember it was like the classic case of Republican corruption. Democrats make billions of dollars in green subsidies, and Republicans get some vitamin supplements and get their court stained and borrow rich guys' cars. But they tried to put him in prison for that. Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court knocked it down 9-0. So here's a clear-cut case of, all right, we're going to drop this case against Eric Adams. The burden of proof is not there. The case is weak. And they did say that in their reasons. But the first thing that they said was because they're dropping this because it was political, which is a much harder thing to actually prove, as it is easy for us to say. And the second thing they said is because we need his help on illegal immigration in New York. Which is not a legal reason, a really good reason to drop a case against someone. Right. Mm-hmm. It might actually, it's a very good reason to drop a case against someone, but it's not a good thing to say because, and these lawyers know, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. So that's an example of they're going to get bogged down on that in court. They're going to have to explain that, whereas it would have been very easy to explain the lack of evidence. And that's kind of the second thing that I was thinking about, because early DOJ trouble happened, same U.S. Acting Attorney General, when they collected a list of all agents who'd worked on the January 6th case. Now, this is an important thing to do. Mm-hmm. The January 6th, the FBI was completely weaponized. People across the Bureau, people I know, were taken off of important cases that they were working on, saying all resources on J6, all resources. And there were violent perps there and con men and liars. Right. Some of them are still floating around the ecosystem. They were also raiding grandmothers and raiding people who trespass and seizing Lego sets and all this completely insane stuff. But any one of these things that feeds into the left has very simple narratives because they have very simple minds in a lot of things. It's like you're either Hitler or you're Nixon or you're a Confederate. And sometimes you can blend all three together, but that's how they see the world because they don't know a lot of history. And you don't want to feed into that. So when you ask for a list of all FBI agents who crossed you politically, that kind of feeds into the Nixon, Mecca, Hitler, Confederate, and they start to freak out. There's responsible ways to do all of this stuff because all of this stuff is important. Like order review. I would like to know what went wrong in the J6 investigation and what resources were used. How did the federal government deploy resources? Where did we take people off of cases? And guess what? In that big trove of that big bear hug of data, you're going to get a list of every agent who did everything because those are resources, and you don't feed in. So these are all good moves. These are bold moves. You're going to make mistakes when you have as many bold moves as you're making. But just also don't get too caught up because you will have to answer for a lot of this stuff in court in the coming months and years. So I think basically the move fast and break thing ethos, which has been so great and so successfully deployed here, is good. But Republicans ought to take a card from Teddy Roosevelt's speak softly and carry a big stick.
So dive a little bit more into what the principle is that you're suggesting moving forward if you're going to unite these different messaging fails. Is it just the lacking the elegance of leaving out what you don't need to say?
Yes, leave out what you don't need to say. Just like you would do if you're ever talking to a police officer, an investigator, the FBI. Don't talk to the FBI. You will go to prison. That's the number one rule in D.C. is the FBI is like, we want to clear some things up. You're going to prison. So just don't say a word. But in general, the more you say, the more trouble you get in. You don't need to. I mean, the left was so capable of doing so much over so many years. Take lessons from them, by not until the very end, not saying what they were doing. It wasn't until since Barack Obama, since the second coming of their Messiah, did they actually start saying what they meant. When you started to see AOC coming out and saying the Green Deal is about economics, not climate, they started to be open. Then you defeat them. Republicans should take a lesson from that and just say we're about law and order.
Yes, it sounds like the flip side of that is what you do say is extremely important, and we've been talking about that a little bit. So, it's how you frame this. Like you just mentioned, the list of all the FBI agents who worked on January 6th. Of course, a lot of them were just ordered to. I mean, it's like how huge percentage of the entire agency, right?
6,000 agents.
So yes, framing that in the way you said, this is about justice. This is about law and order. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And saying that, I think, is really important and goes to what you're saying, because then you at least, the left's going to have their narrative anyway. But if you drop out the sorts of things you're describing that you don't need to say, and then you frame it the right way as to why you're doing it, then, let them have at it.
Exactly.
I want to look at the man himself, though, right? Donald Trump, because in his first term, the man could be, tweeting out in the middle of the night, and it would dominate the entire news cycle for that day. And you're like, this is just like stream of consciousness Donald Trump at 3 a.m. Well, this time around, dare I say, we've seen some restraint from Donald Trump. Again, we had the Napoleon stuff. He has some fun still, whatever. But this isn't just Donald Trump making news with every single post on True Social these days.
Right. This is Donald Trump, elder statesman.
Who thought we would get there?
Can you believe it? This is Donald Trump, where you've got the founding editor of Politico coming out and saying he is the most consequential political figure of our generation. He is someone who is going to define it. He is a once-in-a-lifetime political talent. You know what's funny about the tweeting? One, I'm sure you guys get this because you do politics, but my friends and parents are like, hey, could you please tell Donald Trump to tweet less? So, well, one, he hasn't asked me about that. I appreciate the access you think I have.
Yes.
And everyone's asked him to do that. And he's not going to do it. Old dogs don't change their tricks. Don't learn their
People
tricks.
have been asking him to do that for a long time.
I mean, Bill Barr told me a story once of going into a biker's bar, goes into a fireman's bar, goes in, and you see this guy with a Mama Never Loved Me tattoo, like, love the president, love what he's doing. Could you get him to tweet a little less? So everyone loves it. It's like the most entertaining aspect of his first term was the incredible tweets, probably peaked with Joe and Mika. But it did kind of pull back. And this is part about being quiet sometimes. Governing soundly while being quiet. And walking in slow motion videos to your helicopter with your black trench coat and your red tie, looking presidential. So much, and he understands this, so much of being a politician is show. So much of the presidency is pomp and circumstance. So much circumstances. So much is the bully pulpit, looking the part. That's what Americans want. He knows he wants that in his cabinet members, and he's doing it a lot more in his messaging and how he acts. And I'm here for it. Of course, we got a long time left.
Well, when you do talk to Donald Trump, if you could ask him what the whole Covfefe thing was, if you could just get to the bottom of that, we'd all appreciate that.
One of my all-time favorites. Yeah. Well, first off, when you go back to this, because it's wild how X, Twitter, has been such an intrinsic part of Donald Trump's rise, fall, and comeback. And when he started, everyone said he shouldn't be tweeting, but of course, that's only at least half true, if not mostly wrong.
Mostly wrong, I think.
He had to claw his way into power. And as he suggested, he had the incredible power of every time he tweet, he has this way of just going over the line in his opponent's head, just enough so they freak out and then overextend themselves attacking him. And he can just command the media. So then they decide, we have to cut him off of all of this, right? We have to just take away his account. He's not on X anymore. But then when he
became more powerful than I could ever imagine.
Yes, but then when he comes back,
he became more powerful than the Emperor of Rome.
Yes, now you see the judicious use of this power, and it's remarkable to behold. But think also about why he doesn't have to say all the things on Twitter anymore. There's an entire ecosystem, and the guy who owns the platform, kind of saying things for him,
and they're doing this stuff for him. One of the great things about the interview that I saw with Elon Musk and Donald Trump was that he said, when you do an executive order, doesn't mean that they get followed. Yeah. And I don't think he knew that at first.
Yes.
I think a lot of people who hadn't been in D.C. for a long time didn't know that these are basically glorified press releases, and that's all. And now they're being acted. It doesn't need to be acted out. And I tell you, it's sparing me some sleep, because I do remember he wakes up early. In the first term, back when I was a bachelor and probably staying up too late in the first place, I had notifications set for his Twitter. And starting at 5:30 in the morning, it'd be bzz, and I'm sitting there next to my phone, I'm like, what is the president up to? sometimes it's a pretty wild morning.
I want to get your take on Karoline Leavitt, right? The White House press secretary. She's been doing a really good job. She's the youngest, I believe, to ever do so. She's 27 years old, out there and just wheeling and dealing with the media and making them look like fools almost every single day.
She's such an impressive force. She's fallen right into it. When she first walked out at the podium, that first press conference, I remember you could see a little bit of nervousness in her. And then I think you realize maybe J.D. Vance gave her the pep talk. You're smarter than these people. They may be older than you. They may have more experience than you. But one of the big secrets of Washington, best kept secrets, is how stupid everyone is. Like, people notice this in their own jobs. Everyone, whether you're in an office or work in a garage, there's always someone you work with who's been promoted who shouldn't have been. But that doesn't change no matter what level of power you're at. You can get to the top of the Pentagon, the top of the Senate and the House, and you'll still see that person who just succeeds despite being stupid and bad. And so if you have, it gives you that confidence. Like maybe like everyone puts on their pants one leg at a time in the morning. It gives you that confidence to go out there and to walk into the lion's den, and it's been rewarded because you stick to message and you do good. And I think at the same time, the press has also backed away from some of the full WWE matches they used to have, screaming at the president. My favorite was Caitlin Collins screaming at Donald Trump about Russia while he did Easter egg hunts with children on the lawn. It's like, you people are demented. And it looks so bad on them that they got rid of, what's his name? I've already forgotten, from CNN. And I think they've dialed it back. And that leads to more constructive conversation.
Don't you think there's a breath of fresh air aspect to this that is almost nonpartisan, given the dynamic of the last press secretary and the way that she responded to questions, which is, I'll get back to you.
I'll circle back.
Look, I'm going to circle back after I go through my binder. Binder's full of circle backs. And here you have someone who is just able to, it's like going back to the campaign. You have people who are able to talk off the cuff and talk about stuff and give answers to things. And the answers happen to be on the right side of the truth, I think, most of the time. And so all of a sudden, it feels like, morning in America. It feels like the sun is shining in the White House again every time she talks.
And she has the added benefit of having watched multiple press secretaries for Donald Trump. I mean, originally, of course, you had Spicer going out there who's like, Trump wants me to throw chairs at the press and fight to the death at anything he's ever tweeted. And then you had kind of a change. And I think my favorites, of course, Huckabee Sanders was phenomenal. She, what blew my mind, she always gave those monotone answers. I always wondered, does she read books to her children that way? Same voice. And then one day, also at an Easter egg roll, she was reading children's books, and she does. She uses it. There's no voices. There's no.
It's just Sarah.
I think my favorite was probably what's her name, Kellyanne.
Kellyanne Conway
at the end, who. Kayleigh McEnany, excuse me, was my favorite of the press secretaries because she kind of combined them both, a no-nonsense and a go-after, and it obviously made the president happy. So that's why I think where Karoline Leavitt has watched these people and learned from them. What she must have been a teenager when these guys were on the TV for that, and learn from them what works best, how to be a press secretary for a guy who has more press relationships than anyone in the comms office. How to be the press secretary for someone who's going to not run his next tweet by you. It's pretty difficult work, and you can learn from who succeeded and who failed.